Welcome to OurSport. I'm your host, Larry Ola. My son, John Ola, is the one behind the camera and the editor. Week 1 of the 150th season of college football is in the books, and of course it was eventful. Now, last year, I thought the thing that differentiated that season from the ones before it was pretty chalky. We had a lot of games where the team that was supposed to win did. Not as many upsets as normal, aside from the Purdue upset over Ohio State and the manner in which that game happened. But the whole year, Clemson and Alabama were supposed to meet for the national title, and they did. This year, we reverted to form. I kind of thought it would be this way, and hopefully we have a lot more of this coming up. Now, no ranked teams lost yesterday to unranked teams, but we did have one of the largest upsets in the history of college football, perhaps already regarded as the worst loss in Tennessee history. The Tennessee Volunteers lose at home as a 26-point favorite to the Georgia State Panthers. Now, my son and I, we live in the Atlanta area, outside the Atlanta area. And we certainly have a favorite team, but because we're both kind of obsessed with football, we need another team to follow. And I said to John one day, I said, let's pick a second team. Let's pick a second favorite team and kind of follow them and see how they do. And he said, sure. And we looked around and we thought of all the lower level teams and the FBS. But we decided simply, we have a team that we could follow that's 30 miles from our house. Why not just follow Georgia State? So we did. And we kept a closer eye on them than we do a lot of other teams, as much as we could. So I do have some familiarity with this program, considering. I will tell you that in Sean Elliott's first year, they were not that great of a running team. They got to a bowl game and they won it, their first bowl game, their first bowl win. It was a great year. They finished 7-6. And last year they slipped quite a bit. They went 2-10. So this was the team in arguably the worst conference in the FBS, the Sun Belt, and it finished last place in the worst conference. You could argue that this was the worst team in college football last year. That probably wouldn't be correct, but you wouldn't be that far off. They'd certainly be in the bottom 20. But if you were watching them last year, you could see toward the end of the year, they started to get better. The margins of their losses started to tighten up. And they started to run the ball a little bit, and they had some success with this. They didn't run the ball very well their entire bowl year, and this was one trend that kind of picked up. Coach Elliott has said that he wants to build a team from the lines out, from the line of scrimmage. Having said that, this team should not have beat the Tennessee Volunteers, even a down Tennessee team. This team is a 26-point favorite for a reason, and when you watch that game, what's shocking is that how much of a fluke this was not. This was not a fluke win. This was not a 1-point win on the last play, the way Appalachian State beat Michigan, or the way Stanford beat USC about 10 years ago. This was complete, I wouldn't say domination, but this was a clear beating on the line of scrimmage, on both sides of the line of scrimmage, by the Georgia State Panthers. Tennessee scored a cosmetic touchdown late in the game to keep it within 8 points. That was with 2 seconds left. If you take that cosmetic touchdown out in the second half, Georgia State outscored Tennessee 24-6. Georgia State outscored the Tennessee Volunteers 24-6 in a half of football, and won that game by shoving Tennessee up and down the field in the run game. They outrushed Tennessee. It was really startling to see this. Now, Tennessee has some real issues, obviously. One last thing on Georgia State. By the way, before I go to them, they're going to have a good year, it looks like. And despite this win, they need to be on upset alert next week, even though they play Furman. Because it is so difficult to refocus after a game like this. They're going to get a lot of publicity more than they've ever gotten. They deserve it. They earned this win. And they could easily lose to Furman next week, and I would not be surprised at all. This was excellent work in every phase in this game against Tennessee, though. Now, Tennessee. This program it's strange to see Tennessee like this. It really is. And to realize that last year perhaps was not a year zero rebuild. Last year, when they were getting killed by Missouri, getting beaten badly by Vanderbilt perhaps was not a fluke. It was strange to see them beat some of the teams they did, a really good Kentucky team. They beat Auburn on the road, and they have a 3-game losing streak to Vanderbilt. The last 2 times, they've just been getting killed by Vanderbilt. This should not happen. So, one of the things you noticed in that game was how uninspired Tennessee was. How they would hang their heads the minute something happened. They had no energy. They had no enthusiasm. It was odd to watch that game. I watched the whole game because at Neyland Stadium is a cavernous environment, and it was quiet as a tomb. It was amazing how the fans they realized what was happening. It was hard to cheer for your team when you realize that you're playing a team that you should beat, and they come into your stadium and they start pushing you up and down the field, and your team is listless and uninspired and has no energy. Other premier teams, well, I would say Tennessee is obviously premier teams, but the teams that they handle their business against lesser competition, a lot of them. They play lesser competition, did what they were supposed to, and put those teams away. Even Alabama, who struggled for a half against Duke, just in the second half, put the pedal down and took care of them. Clemson toyed with Georgia Tech on Thursday night, but they knew they were the better team, and they did not give Georgia Tech any chance to think they had a prayer in that game. And they really dominated them from start to finish. And Tennessee, of course, is not Alabama or Clemson, but Georgia State is not Georgia Tech or Duke. They're at a lower level, and that should have been a similar result. So I think that was the biggest story of week 1 in a week that had some other big stories. The second biggest story, I thought, was obviously the Auburn-Oregon game in Dallas. Oregon's quarterback, Justin Herbert, extremely highly regarded, came back for his senior year, playing behind what's viewed as almost universally the best offensive line in the country, considered a top 2 pick in the draft, perhaps the top pick in the upcoming NFL draft as an NFL prospect. Auburn, all they were starting was a true freshman quarterback at Bo Nix. Now a highly regarded true freshman quarterback, but a true freshman nonetheless. And they did not have the offensive line Oregon had, but they had what was considered the best defensive line in the country. And so this became a litmus test to see which one of these units could prevail if that's how the game would go. And what's amazing to me is how close this game came to being a blowout. At one point, Oregon was up 21-3, but they had a touchdown pass that was dropped in the end zone on 4th down. Or was it 3rd down and a field goal was missed? Regardless, they could have easily been up 28-3. And they had another drive because of a punt return, getting the Auburn red zone, and Auburn forced a fumble that was returned over 80 yards by a defensive lineman to flip the field. And Auburn got a field goal out of that to make it 21-6. So you're talking about 2 plays that could have turned this 21-6 game theoretically into a 35-3 game. And yet that's not what happened. Auburn's defense, I felt, won this game. That front 4, they were great. They were pushing these acclaimed Oregon guards back into the backfield, and I didn't think this was a draw. I think Auburn's defense clearly won this game and controlled it, gave them a chance to win. Well, I should say Bo Nix won the game on the second to last play when he threw the ball to Seth Williams. This was a fantastic game. Justin Herbert, when he had a chance on the last play of the game to throw a Hail Mary, I, for the life of me, do not understand why he would throw the ball out of bounds. If you're regarded as a top NFL quarterback, you're probably accurate enough to keep the ball in play in the field, the entire football field, I would say. And he gave them no chance to win that way. A disappointing loss for Oregon. They can't win games away from Allen Stadium. This is a good team, not a great team. They're starting to get a lot more talent under Mario Cristobal, but away from their home stadium the last 3 years, they're 4-14. That is a terrible record. That is beyond terrible for a team that's regarded with top 10 aspirations or playoff aspirations or higher. So they have more games on the road that they're going to have to handle. In terms of Auburn, they needed this win badly. Oregon, they could have used this win for prestige, but Auburn needed this win. Gus Malzahn is the Auburn coach, is on the hot seat. And if he had lost this game, he's going to have more losses coming up. He's going to play teams better than this in his conference. And I think that he put Bo Nix in there as almost as a job saver. As he could say at the end of the year, says, well, we went 8-4, but we were playing a true freshman quarterback. Think how bright the future is. But you can't do that if you go 7-5 or 6-6, because there are people that wanted him out at Auburn with a similar record last year. And so this had to be a win he could get and chalk up and put on his resume. Their schedule is brutal, maybe the toughest in the country. Of course, they played a game with Georgia. Of course, they play Alabama, LSU, A&M. Their crossover game in the East, they didn't pull Vandy this year. They pulled Florida, and that game is at Florida in the Swamp. I think Auburn has the toughest schedule in the country. They're going to win some of those games, but this could be the difference in record that saves Gus Malzahn's job. If that happens, behind Bo Nix next year, they could be really formidable. The top tier of the SEC, aside from Auburn, all had good days. The middle tier, not only Tennessee, had pretty bad days. This was an embarrassing day for the Southeast Conference. Upsets everywhere. If not upsets, South Carolina, for example, blowing a 10-point lead to North Carolina. South Carolina blows a lot of these leads lately. And when leads are blown like this, the defense is always blamed. I don't understand a lot of times why nobody blames the starting quarterback. The starting quarterback's job is to hold these leads. And under Jake Bentley, they have blown a lot of double-digit leads. He kind of reminds me of, he's like the Matt Ryan of the SEC. Missouri going on the road to Wyoming, giving up 300 yards rushing to a Mountain West Conference team. Not a good representation of the SEC there. Memphis playing at home against Ole Miss. Memphis, because of the proximity of these two schools, a lot of the local products don't get recruited by Ole Miss. This is a fertile recruiting ground for the Rebels. But when those players are not recruited and end up going to Memphis, if they don't get a sniff, they get pretty cranky about it, and this becomes their Super Bowl. Memphis treats Ole Miss like their Super Bowl. Ole Miss does not treat Memphis like their Super Bowl. Ole Miss has bigger fish to fry. The Egg Bowl, all the competition in the SEC West. And if you watch this game, this was a pretty bad showing. Ole Miss, less than 200 yards offense. This game was not as close as the 15-10 score. Memphis controlled this game from start to finish. The upsets didn't stop in the SEC. Nevada beat Purdue on a last-second field goal. A true freshman kicker makes a 56-yard field goal and then gets awarded, the kicker was a walk-on, gets awarded a scholarship in the locker room. One of the best days of his life. We're happy for him. And Boise State upsetting Florida State. Boise State had to travel across the country playing a true freshman quarterback against Florida State. And that game was moved to Tallahassee because of the hurricane. Boise State puts 600 yards offense with a true freshman quarterback on Florida State. For 26 minutes, Florida State looked great. Last episode, we called them the most underrated team in the country. Kendall Briles, the new offensive coordinator, looked like a genius for 26 minutes. And after that, he made himself and us look pretty stupid. Thank you, Kendall Briles. And Florida State clearly has systemic issues. They have issues that are going to last more than this game. You cannot give up 600 points to a freshman quarterback at home from Boise, Idaho. That cannot happen. By the way, the Mountain West Conference, if you notice, starting to have some pretty big wins. That conference is kind of improving its profile. In other news, USC beat Fresno State, and it's the ultimate example of a Pyrrhic victory. The highly regarded quarterback, JT Daniels, got hit on a blitz, tore his ACL, he's out for the year. Some thoughts about this. USC switched to the air raid. They hired Graham Harrell, who was, as offensive coordinator, very similar to Cliff Kingsbury, came from the same tree, both played quarterback at Texas Tech. And they've done similar to what Michigan did. It's a different system, but I've always said somewhat gimmicky, and I will stand by this, and I think this proved it. Because the system, I think, is what got JT Daniels injured. This is a simplified system. They have 30 plays. This is what they said themselves. They have 3 protections. 3 protections. So when you have a 7-month off season and your opponent has time to study your film and figure out how to break through 3 of your protections, you're only going to run 3 of them, even a team like Fresno State will be able to do this. Sure enough, Fresno State comes with a jailbreak blitz. JT Daniels gets hit, and he's out for the year. So I think that the system cost them their starting quarterback. Even worse, here's a situation that's going on with a lot of teams that is not getting talked about enough. Before a certain amount of time, 10, 20 years ago, the 5-star quarterbacks always got publicity, always got hype, but it's at a different level nowadays. 5-star quarterbacks get scouted at 9th grade, get offered at 10th grade. They're known well before time, before they commit, and they have a large presence on social media. This was not the case 20 years ago. And when you have a quarterback like this, like let's go with Tate Martell, who was one of the highest regarded quarterbacks in the country out of Bishop Gorman High School, commits to Ohio State. He's supposed to be the starting quarterback after Dwayne Haskins leaves. And Ohio State brings in a transfer. They bring in Justin Fields from Georgia, also one of the highest rated quarterbacks in the country, and he transfers from Georgia. So Justin Fields committed to Georgia knowing that Jake Fromm was there as a starting quarterback, but he was a 5-star, and after 1 year he thought, I don't want to sit, I want to go somewhere else. I want to be able to play right away. Tate Martell is at Ohio State. He hears Justin Fields is coming in. Right away he gets on social media. He says, you're not going to run me off this quickly. I'm here to compete. I'm here to win a starting job. 2 days later he leaves. So you have these cornerstone programs now, these Mount Rushmore programs, some of the greatest programs in college, and they have one crucial weakness. Many of them are going to lack depth at quarterback. Georgia now has Jake Fromm and not much behind him beside freshmen. There was also another 5-star quarterback that Jake Fromm ran off, Jacob Eason. He went to Washington. Justin Fields is now at Ohio State. They don't have Tate Martell as a backup because Martell transferred to Miami. If Justin Fields gets hurt, Ohio State has serious issues at quarterback, just like Georgia. USC had a highly regarded backup behind JT Daniels, Jack Sears. He entered the transfer portal, and he's gone now. So USC went from JT Daniels to a true freshman quarterback in 1 snap. They went from a 1st to a 3rd stringer in 1 snap and 1 injury. Now, a program like this can withstand this and always have a winning season, unless maybe you're coached by Clay Helton. But this keeps you from being a possible playoff contender to an 8-4 year. If you have 2 5-star running backs or 2 5-star defensive linemen or 3 5-star offensive linemen, they're not going to leave because they can all play. They can rotate. A quarterback wants to start. A quarterback, there's only one of them on the field. And the thing is that this is the most important position of football. This is the position that wins or loses games more than any other because the decision making about a quarterback is so important. So USC, for their season, this is probably going to get Clay Helton fired. If something happens to Jake Fromm, Georgia's a great team. They can run the ball. They have a big offensive line. They can beat Georgia Tech doing this. They can beat Kentucky doing this. They can probably beat almost everybody on their schedule. But against Auburn or Florida, those games would be in doubt. Ohio State, if they lose Justin Fields, they play that Michigan State defense, which is nasty. They play Penn State, perhaps even Michigan. They could lose all those games. This singular development that has changed college football takes 11-1 teams and makes them capable to dropping to Citrus Bowl standards or Liberty Bowl standards with 1 single injury. And nobody's really talking about this yet, but it's going to be more and more evident. USC is the first case, and if you keep an eye on it, it'll happen to some team this year. If not this year, it'll happen after that. Teams, Mount Rushmore teams, cannot stack 5-star quarterbacks anymore because they want to play. and they will go somewhere else for their own interests, and they will not cripple a team season, but they will definitely impact a team season in a negative way. Next week is going to be one of the biggest games of the year, LSU at Texas. We're all looking forward to that one. It should be great. That's our episode for this week. If you like what we do here, subscribe, turn on notifications, please. We have a Facebook page, OurSport College Football, and we're on Twitter, OurSport3. We're working on getting a podcast up. That'll be soon. On behalf of me and John, thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next week.